again, welcome, and thank you again for joining us early in the morning for some of us, late in the evening for Haley, who's joining us. But this is the Mānoa Fulbright US Student Program information session. And we already got our first question, so let me just make it very clear. The Fulbright US Student Program, that is an opportunity for US students to go abroad to either complete a graduate degree, teach English, or conduct research. So it's not for international students to come to the US, but US students to go abroad. So, okay. My name is Kristen Connors, and I'm the Fulbright Program Advisor for graduate students. I'll be helping to moderate as well as conduct part of today's presentation. I did share some messages in the chat box if you have an opportunity to review those, as that goes over our logistics for today. We are recording this session, and I will send an email once the video has been posted to our Graduate Division YouTube channel. But essentially today, what you're going to do is you're going to hear about the Fulbright US Student Program. You'll get a chance to hear from our current and hopefully former Fulbrighter to speak both about the English teaching assistant side and the research experience through Fulbright. And then at the end, we'll save time for some questions for our panelists. So just really quickly, if we can go around and just have our panelists introduce themselves, just say their name, their role, and then if you were a Fulbrighter, what Fulbright award you received. So Betsy, why don't we start with you?
Aloha, good morning. I'm Betsy Gilland. I'm a professor in the Department of Second Language Studies, but I'm also the Fulbright program advisor for undergraduate students, which means anybody who's currently an undergrad student at UH, or if you graduated with your bachelor's degree from UH and have not entered a master's or other graduate program here or anywhere else. So I'm happy to talk with students who aren't sure if they're eligible to be advised by UH advisors as well. So please do reach out. I was not a student Fulbrighter, but I did receive a Fulbright Scholar Award to Chile in 2018.
Great. And I'll save most of my introduction for the slides, but my name is Haley. Aloha. It's been a while since I've gotten to say that. And yes, I am a current ETA in Turkey, and I graduated from UH last year with my master's in ed admin. So again, I'll save the rest of the introduction for a little bit later, but I'm so happy to be here, happy to chat with y'all today.
Hi, sorry I was late. I was having internet issues, but my name is Ricky Larkin. I was a Fulbright awardee, I believe, in 2022 to 2023 in Belgium. And I was a research award, and it was a nice time. I spent about 6 months in Belgium doing a research project, but we can talk about that later. Second Language Studies is the department. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Betsy's going to lead the way.
Okay, so yeah, the Fulbright program is now well into the second half of its first 100 years in existence. It was created in 1946, just after World War II, as a way to improve understanding across nations, person-to-person connections as well, because the US government understood that one of the ways of making the US well respected across the world was by sending ordinary people to exchange ideas with other ordinary people rather than diplomats or soldiers at a high level. So the way it's administered, though, is within the US, it's administered by IIE, but in each country, there's either a binational Fulbright Commission or an office in US embassies that administer it. So there's somebody in each country that Fulbrighters go to that takes care of Fulbrighters there. And one of the things about Fulbright is that they really want to represent the United States. So everybody in the US, rather than any specific narrow demographic. So Fulbright is seeking applicants from many different backgrounds, all states and territories of the US, and participants are generally high-level academics in terms of being driven and knowing what they're doing, but don't feel like you're not good enough because you're still a student, because this is the program for students. And Fulbright isn't just an academic program, it's also a cultural exchange. So Fulbrighters don't spend all their time in the classroom. They also interact with people in the countries where they go, and make friends and do all kinds of things.
What we'll do right now is we're going to have Ricky and Haley just talk a little bit more about their Fulbright Awards and what their experience was like as a Fulbrighter. So Ricky, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I was, like I said, I was in Belgium in 2022. I kind of went for the majority of the academic year, 2022 to 2023. My project was on poke bowls. It was an interesting one. There's a lot of poke shops in Belgium. I noticed that when I was there, visiting a friend. And so when I wrote my Fulbright application, I focused on something that was interesting, that was about Hawaii, but also not about Hawaii, about Belgium as well. And it was based at the University of Antwerp. So it was one of these special projects that was partnershiped with the university, where the university also contributed funds to the Fulbrighter. So that's why the time was different. Normally, I think it's a 9-month Fulbright program, and mine was, I think, 6. And Antwerp was great. The university took care of me. They actually had a fire right before I arrived that took out the wing of the university that my department was in. Luckily, no one was injured, but it was pretty damaging on the roof, and so they had to redo the roof to the building. So they put us in like this co-working space in the city that had really nice coffee, and it was really nice space to work in. It was very fancy. Felt very, very European. Ooh. And yeah, I volunteered part-time doing like safety for rock climbing and a gym there. Usually Fulbright has you do a volunteer activity. It doesn't need to be related to your grant. It could be something else. And I guess one of my big focuses for my application, I think that's one of the reasons why it stood out, was because I tried to focus on the reason I needed to go to this specific place. So why me studying language in Hawaii needs to go all the way to Belgium? Well, there's a specific reason why, and I, found the little hook that was interesting enough to get them to invite me for the interview. And there's some pictures. That's the wife of the ambassador. We had lunch one day, so you end up in a very kind of, I would say, like quasi-diplomatic role that gives you access to people and places that maybe you wouldn't have access to if you weren't in some kind of governmental program like this. But yeah, that's a creek. I would highly recommend having a creek if you go to Belgium. The beer, it's nice and sour. That was the only problem, was I gained a lot of weight in Belgium, I would say. So be careful if you go Northern Europe. And there's a picture of one of the poke restaurants that I went to. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Ricky. Haley,
Yeah.
do you want to share about your Fulbright Award and experience?
Yes, I would love to. So instead of aloha, we say merhabalar. So hello, everybody again. So my name's Haley. So currently I am in Turkey. I know it is morning for all of you. It is currently almost 10:15 p.m. in the evening here. So I am in the future, which is cool. But yes, so I teach English here at the university. I am in a small coastal city called Ordu. So it is on the Black Sea coast. I had never heard of Ordu before I come for the Fulbright grant. I had been to Turkey before, and it's a very special place for me, but I wasn't so familiar with this region. So it's been a really lovely experience getting to, experience this country from, a professional standpoint, but also just learning about this new region. Because if you know anything about Turkey, it is such a diverse country. You travel 1 hour away and the landscape is so different. The people are different, the food, the culture. So it's a really cool place to be. I currently teach at a hazırlık, which is basically a prep school for incoming college students. They kind of have this weird limbo year between graduating high school and starting their freshman year of college. And so it's basically a whole year dedicated to learning English for students who may have not met their department's required English levels. So I teach English language literature students and ocean engineering students as we're on the coast here. So I have about 120 students. I teach just speaking courses, and I teach about 21 hours a week. So it is quite a few classes, but since they are speaking classes, I think they're pretty fun. We just have conversations for 21 hours. It's really good. It's really good. But on top of that, I'm also involved in a lot of English language learning initiatives on campus. We have a foreign language club, which we have weekly meetings where we have students lead discussions. This week, we're actually having a psychologist come and talk about her therapy, like a therapy practice she's developed with books. And so we have really interesting speakers from all over the community that come and talk with the students. There's also other like outside English speaking clubs. I actually facilitated one last night. I also talked about psychology. It's a very psychological week here in Urdu. But yeah, so we get together once a week as well and meet at a coffee shop and talk in English. So it's really interesting. I moved to this region not thinking there would be a lot of English learners here because Turkey in general has a reputation of not really being exposed to English that much, but I've been really pleasantly surprised here in such a small city how many English language learners there are. And in my free time, I also try and travel a little bit, as you can see here. Also in Urdu, there's a lot to do. It's a small city, but I've taken Latin dance classes, I've taken tennis classes with my roommate. There's lots of things to do. But yes, for these first three pictures are for some trips I took around the country. So Mardin was in the south. That second picture is actually from here, not a travel, but we have a beautiful coast. And the third one is at a lake called Uzungol, which means long lake. And then there's me teaching. I actually have been invited to guest teach in different departments. Like this is from the tourism faculty, but I've also talked with the dentistry faculty in the medical school here. And that picture at the bottom is the director of the School of Foreign Languages on the right side, and in the middle is the university rectorate. So I got to have a meeting with Mr. President himself. So, and also too, I've had some opportunities to meet, with the ambassador here. And so as Ricky was saying, there's a lot of really neat opportunities that you probably wouldn't get if you weren't, related with a federal program. So yeah, I've had such a good experience here and I'm happy to share today.
Awesome. Well, both countries look absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing about your experiences. Betsy, do you want to talk a little bit about eligibility?
Sure. Yeah. So the Fulbright U.S. student program is open to anybody who is graduating from a bachelor's degree. So by the time you start the program, you must already have your bachelor's in hand, which means you can apply while you're still an undergraduate, but you need to be finished with your undergraduate before you start the Fulbright. Recent graduates, anybody who's currently in a graduate student or anybody who's a career professional, including creative, performing artists, musicians. So it's not necessarily doing academic work if your focus is some sort of creative or performing work as well. Basic eligibility, though, you must be a U.S. citizen by the application deadline. So green card holders, if you are planning to get citizenship, and it'll be in place before October 7th, you can apply. You must have the bachelor's in hand by the time you start the grant. So you can apply during your last year of undergraduate study, but need to be sure that you'll be finished before you leave for your Fulbright project. And you can't have a doctorate in hand at the time of the application. So if you're currently in a PhD program and about to finish, as long as you aren't graduating until fall 2025, you can apply for the Fulbright student program, even if you'll have the doctorate in place by the time you start the Fulbright program. Each country also has specific requirements. Some projects are only open to people with bachelor's and master's, not in a PhD program. Some projects are only open to master's and PhD level students. So be sure to read what the program is looking for. Same with the English teaching assistant programs. Some are specifically geared towards applicants with very little teaching experience. Some actually want you to have teaching experience or a degree related to language teaching. So be sure to read each individual country description carefully to figure out if you are eligible to apply. Next. So there are many, many awards, 1,800 plus, available in 140 or more countries worldwide. So pretty much, if you can think of a place you want to go, Fulbright quite likely has an award there. And if they don't, there's probably a country nearby or with a similar profile that does. Their study and research awards are what Ricky did. They are available for people doing independent research, or taking courses towards a graduate degree, or doing some sort of arts-based project. And again, things vary quite a bit depending on the country. So some are only 6 months long, some are 12 months long, some are 9 months. Some you can decide how long you want to go, some it's a fixed amount of time. And also, it does depend. So if you want to do a master's degree, there may be specific requirements for that. Some countries, the award is for a particular university. Some it's for any institution in that country. The other, I didn't talk about ETA yet. The other option for doing a Fulbright Student Award is to be an English teaching assistant, which is what Haley's doing. And although it's called an assistant, I think Haley, it sounds like you're doing an awful lot of teaching on your own as well. So it's not just helping people teach in that country. You may be the teacher of record for a class. You may be taking on the work of teaching. Depends a lot also on the program. These are usually 8 to 10 months because it's one school year in that country. So the start date is usually around when the academic year starts in that country. Korea, the program doesn't start until the new year because their school year starts in March. And there are up to around 75 countries at this point that have ETA positions too. All right, now next slide. Okay, and so there's a lot of things you get out of doing Fulbright too. It may sound like, wow, there's a lot of limitations and restrictions and things, but as a program, it gives you quite a bit that trying to go off and do this on your own, you wouldn't get. So there's all awards, you get round trip airfare from your home of record to that place and home again. You get some sort of monthly stipend, depends on the country because cost of living is very different in different places. There's accident and sickness benefits. If you're doing the ETA program, you get to take an online TESOL fundamentals course. So even if you don't have any prior experience teaching, you'll get some basics, and this is a really useful qualification too, so that after you finish the program, you have a certificate in place for getting future English teaching jobs. Depending on the country and the project, you may get support for dependents if you have a spouse or kids that you need to bring with you. You may get additional allowance for research materials or teaching materials. You may get your tuition paid if you're applying to do a graduate degree. You may get language lessons if you want to improve or learn the language of the country where you're stationed. There may be midterm enhancement activities, some kind of a conference that you can go to, and potentially also disability-related accommodations. And then once you finish Fulbright, there's a huge network of Fulbright alumni, people who have done all different Fulbright programs. The State Department has an alumni website with a lot of additional resources and connections. eligible for 12 months of non-competitive hiring status within the federal government, which means that when you come back, if you're applying for any kind of a federal job, you get a leg up on that initial application. So people who are not in that status won't be considered before anybody with the non-competitive eligibility is. You also get a Fulbright email address, which can be really useful if you're changing jobs, moving institutions quite a bit. It gives you a permanent, respectable email address. And there's a nonprofit Fulbright association that's related to Fulbright and advocates for Fulbright projects, and also does a lot of social and cultural activities. All right, next. I think this is you now, Kristen, right?
I'll jump in. Thank you so much, Betsy. Okay, so if you are definitely planning on applying for this year's competition, which means that you would be going on your Fulbright grant during 2026 to 2027. Okay, that's how early the competition starts. So again, the current competition that's open is for you to go abroad during 2026 to 2027. Okay, so if you're planning to apply this year, if you haven't been taking notes already, this is where you need to start jotting down some serious notes. So applications are open. I put the Fulbright website in the chat box. If you have not visited the website, now is the time to start going through all the information there. Understanding, are you eligible to apply in regards to the general requirements, right? Do you meet the country-specific requirements, as Betsy was explaining? And then going through what is required for your application. So this is when it all starts. You don't want to wait until the end of summer to start working on your application or turn something in at the very, very end. Betsy and I, as Fulbright program advisors, we would like to meet with you. We try to meet with you if you reach out to us, and we try to assist you through the application process and give you tips and advice. So what you're going to be doing from now until September 7th is working on every single component, which I'll go over in the next slide, of what is required for your application. September 7th is what we consider the UH Manoa campus deadline. If you are a UH Manoa student or alum, and you would like to apply with affiliation to UH Manoa, then you will need to have everything completed online, and you're going to mark that ready for campus review section in the online portal. You don't want to submit. I have to be very, very clear. You are not submitting your application by September 7th. You are just clicking this ready for campus review section. That's all. And what that does is it locks your application so that Betsy and I and the committees that we form will have the opportunity to review your application without you making any changes to it. And we want everything in, completed, and submitted so that we can give you the best feedback possible to make your application highly competitive. This is, I'm going to use that word again, it's a very extremely competitive award program. This coming year, it's going to be even more competitive. Partly because there are less awards being offered, and there are probably going to be even more applicants seeking these types of opportunities, since this is one of the competitions that has open applications right now. So we hope that you will really plan things out and be organized between now and September, and again, be in touch with us and make use of that campus review process that will happen in September. Again, we call it an interview, but just think of it as a feedback session. We've seen enough applications. We know what Fulbright's looking for, that we can try to help you craft your strongest application possible. Then October 7th is the national deadline. After you meet with the committee, we'll unlock your application. You can go back in, make any final revisions, and then it's up to you to submit everything by September 7th. Okay. And then normally in November to December, there are US faculty and former Fulbrighters in the US who will review your application. They're either required to give it a score and a ranking or just a score. And then based on that information, you'll be determined to be a semifinalist for the award and country that you submitted. And that goes on to host country review. At that point, if you are not selected as a semifinalist, you will be notified that you're not moving forward in the competition. If you are a semifinalist, then hopefully sometime between March to June is when you'll receive the final notification that, yay, you've been selected, or you're an alternate, or unfortunately, you have not been selected for the award. So what are these components that you have to be working on? Well, when you open the online portal, there's basically, and here's one of the good things I'm going to say that changed for the application this year. Basically, everything is kind of boxes that you're going to fill in online now. You don't have to really upload anything other than your transcripts, okay? So that's kind of the nice thing, right? You're not working on separate documents, making the mistake or worrying if you upload the wrong thing. Everything just gets filled in, you know, in the online portal. And so some of these are short answer questions. Some of them are a little longer, equivalent to the length of an essay, but they will say what the character limit is for each box. Characters include spaces. Don't use special characters when you're writing in your short answers. So it's going to collect profile data, contact information, educational information, things like that. And then this year, the short answers, so this is a new one. It wants you to talk about your flexibility and adaptability and give examples of how you've demonstrated that. And so I'm just going to give a heads up to Haley and Ricky. I'm gonna ask you to speak to that when we talk about tips and advice and you know, your experience as a Fulbrighter. But so there's going to be a short answer question about flexibility and adaptability, community engagement, which has always been part of Fulbright and the application process. They want to know, how are you planning to be a part of that mutual exchange, right? So not just sharing your you know, experience as an American, but how are you also going to learn from the community that you're living in and that you're a part of? And then the impact of Fulbright, right? Why are you even going through this program? Why does it have to be a Fulbright program that you're doing what you're proposing? Why can't it be something else, right? What are you going to get specifically out of Fulbright with its missions, goals, contacts, everything, right? So saying something like, oh, well, Fulbright's going to allow me to just do my dissertation research, that's really not what they're looking for. They're looking for that deeper connection that speaks to the missions and goals of the overall Fulbright program. And then the statement of grant purpose it's universal to all applicants, regardless of what award and country you're applying for. They want to know, what is it that you're proposing to do and how are you going to do it? And that's, again, really where Betsy and I can come in you know, with our advising background to help you to understand what things to include, how to craft it, how to maybe condense the information that you're normally writing in 10 pages into 6,000 characters, right? So all the challenges that you're encountering while you approach this application. And then for the references, even if a country says that foreign language proficiency is not required, typically what we recommend is that you should always try to find a way to learn the national language of that country, at minimum hospitality level. So you don't have to have that proficiency at time of application, but you should have a plan detailed on how you're going to obtain that level of proficiency by the time you depart for your grant. If you do have proficiency in that language or a related language, it's great to still have an evaluation to show that you have the propensity to be able to learn the, you know, the national language for that country in whatever given amount of time. And then all applications are required to have 3 references depending on what award you are applying for. We may have different recommendations on who you're asking to be your referrals. transcripts and details of what kind of transcripts they're looking for, and if they're official or unofficial, that's all on the website. And then if you're going for a research or study award, study affiliation letter is not always required. Research award, even if it says that your letter of affiliation is not required, you should have a letter of affiliation. I'm just going to tell you, if you don't have a letter of affiliation and you're going for a research award, you likely will be less competitive compared to other applicants. Because for research, it is very, very important that your entire application shows strength and feasibility for you to execute what you are proposing. And having that affiliate letter contributes to that. And then for arts applicants, whatever form of art that you are planning to learn about abroad, you'll also have to include a supplemental materials portfolio that showcases and demonstrates, that form of art. Okay, so now we're going to go into the general tips and advice. And so this is where all four of us are as panelists, we're just going to kind of jump in and share what it is from our background and knowledge that we think will be beneficial for all applicants, and then also specifically for the different types of awards. So first, I'll just start off by saying, get started now. Again, do not wait until September or August even. There are so many things that you could be working on, and generally what I advise applicants is just schedule a designated time every week that you're going to work on your application and slowly chip away at it. So maybe 1 week you're going to fill out all of the countries that you travel to since you were born. And because that's, something that you'll have to share. Or maybe 1 week you're going to work on requesting all your transcripts that you need to upload. Maybe 1 week you're going to work on filling out your professional background, right? So there's always something you can be working on, and that's really why you don't want to wait, because it can just be overwhelming and you might run out of time and not be able to complete the application. I know that several of us wrote about this tip, the research the host country. Does anyone want to jump in and talk about that?
I can talk a little bit about it. I think for me, like at least in my experience, it had really helped me that I had a background knowledge of Turkey. It was actually the first country I had ever visited outside the US. I had gone a few years prior to this award. And so I had this special connection to it already, and I was able to kind of leverage, my knowledge from that, my knowledge from people that I knew, but also just kind of researching the university systems themselves, because the university, as I said, they have this interesting prep school program, and I knew it would be at the university level I'd be teaching. So having that knowledge already shows like you are really passionate about this place you're trying to study at. Maybe you don't even have like a really personal connection to it yet, and that's okay. But show that you care so much that you are going to spend time and be like, okay, even if I don't have this prior connection to this country, I've done my homework on it. I know I would be a good fit for it. And here's reason A, B, C, and D. So really with any sort of application, you should always be doing your homework beforehand. And it is extra work, but it's going to show that you took the extra mile to deserve this award, because you know it's going to fit you and you are going to fit in that community, and that community is also going to be able to take things from you. So I think this is such an important part. There is no part in the essays and short answers that are saying like, oh, like what do you know about this country? Like fill out this information, blah, 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 blah. But show that you're taking those extra steps, because it really shows that you care and that you're really passionate about this.
Betsy, Vicky, anything you want to add to that point?
Something else. Oh, sorry, Ricky. I'll be fast. One of the things that it's worth considering with Fulbright is that unlike Peace Corps, which is meant to assist countries that are generally in need of assistance, Fulbright is really a two-way exchange. So part of what you may learn in your research is that the country you want to go to has some sort of resources that you can't access in the United States if you were to do the same project here. So you can write about that as well. Going to Chile was one of my reasons for wanting to go there, was that they actually had a whole lot more national level policies and funding for things I was interested in. And so I wanted to see, how does it work when we actually fund teacher professional development and English language teaching in a way that supports programs to really develop. And so you can make it clear that you're going to learn from being there, not just give back to them.
I was just going to say that if you're applying for one of the study programs, even if you're not super familiar with that country, I would recommend finding a scholar that you really like and cite them when you are positioning your research in order to try to show to the committee that you're familiar with the scholarship that's being done there as well.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you didn't hear Ricky, I know he said he's having internet access. He was saying he recommends finding a scholar for the country that you're proposing and tying your proposal to their work to show the value of why it's important to go specifically there. So, and then what I was going to add is researching the host country actually applies to all elements of the application, including parts like the host country engagement. There are students who really will take the time to invest researching the specific region that they're proposing research or studying in, or cultural, popular cultural activities where they can engage. So it shows that you really are invested in going to that specific country, that you're not just proposing anything that you think might work. So the other tip that we share on this slide is focus on impact, which is, again, a question that you'll have to be answering as well, but really gets answered partly in the statement of grant, the answer. I want to keep saying essay, but in the statement of grant purpose section now. And particularly with research and study proposals. So again, and thank you, Betsy, for adding this in the chat box. So if you're doing a study proposal, it means that you're planning to do a graduate degree at the master's or PhD level at a university in that foreign country. And you'll have to read through to see what is allowable and what's not allowable. So it's not that every country has that available. And some countries will have it only available at certain institutions for the study award. And what gets tricky is when you're looking, sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but when you look at the award, the way it's posted on the website, it says open study research. And it's like, oh, it's one award, but I'm just doing the research part, or I'm just doing the study part. Well, they title it together because you're actually all applying under one group. So whether you're an applicant proposing to do a graduate degree abroad, or you're doing a research project abroad, all your applications are being reviewed in the same group and you're competing against each other. So that's what that means. But what I was going to say to that about impact is you really have to talk about the impact beyond what you're specifically researching and studying and the impact to your field, right? Think broader picture, right? Are there, economic, maybe you're doing something in STEM, but are there economic impacts to this? Are there policy impacts to this, right? What are the other things that you can think of or other fields that come into play? Betsy, did you want to share anything? And then Haley, I know you provided the tip about ETAs.
I think you pretty much said it. I mean, the idea is you're not, if say you want to do like a research on a particular thing in a particular professor's laboratory, that's not the only thing you'll be doing as a Fulbrighter. So you want to think about how do you fit in with the rest of the institution and the location and the country in general too. And your work isn't just, I want to learn more about this particular molecule, but knowing about this particular molecule will help in bigger ways or connect in bigger ways.
Yeah, and in terms of ETA, like I said earlier, I teach about 21 hours of classes and I have a few extra hours of duties. So, I mean, this is truly a part-time job, right? So there is so much time outside of just teaching where you have the opportunities to engage in the community. And Fulbright knows that. They're going to know that. So they want to know how you're going to use that time. So as I said earlier, something that I really valued from my time at Hawaii was really this focus on experiential education and getting students out of the classroom spaces. And so I was kind of able to leverage that in, my essays at the time. I know the application has since changed a little, and talk about like, okay, I want to engage students in cultural exchange by maybe putting on some events. So like the speaking club that I go to at this coffee shop, I actually had a night where we learned about Hawaii, we learned about hula, we learned about all these different things, and I was able to like show things, bring things. And so they want to know like what are these, how are you going to engage the community not only just by teaching, but by also promoting this cultural exchange, because I think that's the biggest part of it. Because people come to me all the time and they love asking me questions about, my home, the US. They love learning about the language. So you really need to visualize that. Like, what are your skill sets outside of teaching that you can bring to these communities that's going to promote this exchange? Because that's what the program's all about. So start thinking of that now, of some detailed activities. And that's again where research comes into play. So it's super important because it all ties together.
Then Haley, I think you also offered this next tip specifically for ETAs.
Yeah, so highlight any sort of teaching experience you have. And if it's not like tangible, like in the classroom teaching experience, I would say highlight moments of mentorship, highlight moments of cultural exchange. I was fortunate to have taught when I was at UH some of the intro university life courses. I had worked in the athletics department, and so I got to help with some of those classes. So I was able to tie in on that. Like I was working with diverse groups of students, and that's exactly what you're going to be doing with these English classes, because most of my students are Turkish, but I actually have some international students as well. And so how can you engage like diverse groups of people? So if it's not like truly teaching experience, be creative with it. Think of times that you've mentored students. Think of time where you volunteered to work with students. Think of times that you've been in international diverse spaces. But, the more relevant experience you have, the better, of course. But again, it depends on the country and what they're looking for. Turkey is a little more flexible in terms of teaching experience and degree background. But I would say too, if you don't have that many experiences, find some good opportunities to volunteer now and like try and get as many of those as you can. Because again, we have until now, until October 7th to submit those applications. So there's time to get some experience.
Yeah. And then I'm just gonna kind of tie in point number 2 and then another point a little further down, which is kind of what we've been saying. You'll see that everything weaves together with your application, right? Everything has to be in sync and complement each other. So keep that in mind when you're writing your application. And really when you're doing that, you also want to be very authentic and genuine with your application, right? You don't want to write what you think they want to hear. And that's something that again, the committee, when we review your application and FPAs, Betsy and I, we can help you with that. So, even if you're planning to use AI just to give you like a launch point, that's fine. But again, it's a launch point. It's not your final answer, right? It needs to be your own words. And so if you're looking for people to give you feedback, which you should, that's always a very recommended part of the process, is getting feedback on what you're writing for your answers. We recommend going to peers in other fields. You can go to mentors, academic advisors, and while the UH Manoa Writing Center is still open, you can book appointments with them as well. And then the last point on here is about additional funding. So normally Fulbright, we went over the award benefits. Normally Fulbright covers all the essentials, but particularly for those who are planning to do research projects, your award may not come with a research allowance. And so there might be other expenses that need to be covered. Also, while we're very happy to work with you, remember, just like every competition, right? No one is guaranteed to be awarded. So you should always be seeking other opportunities and submitting applications for those as well. And then just a note on here that as with all federal funding opportunities, there is no duplicate funding permitted. So depending if you are awarded something else, which is awesome, you may not be able to receive both awards and apply both awards. You might be able to receive both awards but not use them for the same purpose, right? Use them to fund different parts of your project. But that's something that we can definitely talk about. So let's see. These are ways that you can stay connected and stay abreast of what's going on with everything regarding the Fulbright program. And I will put the link for the email list. If you are not part of our UH Manoa Fulbright email list, we strongly recommend that you get added so that whenever we have updates about things happening with the program, we'll send out tips, reminders, deadlines, things like that. You will stay in the know. So that is open. I know it's housed on our graduate division page, but it doesn't matter if you're undergraduate or graduate. It's the Fulbright email list for all of UH Manoa. So definitely sign up for that. And then we're going to go to questions. So as we wait for questions to come in, Haley and Ricky, I was going to ask you if you could kind of talk about the flexibility and adaptability. Again, I know that's a new short answer question to respond to, but that was always something that as an FPA, I know when I worked with you on your applications, I recommended that you incorporate because those are definitely, attributes that Fulbright was always looking for. So what are ways that during your Fulbright you feel that you've had to exhibit flexibility or adaptability?
I can start. Yeah, I think this is so important to prove because I had been to Turkey in the past, but it's one thing to visit a country for fun. It is a whole other thing to start a life here, to work in a different culture, to find an apartment, to pay bills, like all of these things. And so you need to be able to show that this is something like you can handle because it is such a big life change. So I think it's important for this first part to tie in on, your experiences with these things. Maybe for a lot of y'all, maybe Hawaii isn't home. For me, it's not. And so that was a big change in my life. I had to adapt to and kind of, again, learn this new space, learn this new culture. And also, too, your ability to interact and engage with, you know, um, diverse groups of people. And because it's really important to show again, like you can adapt to this culture because you are going to be surrounded by people who have different mindsets with you, who are curious to learn about yourself. And so if you can tie in any experiences you've had with like international, let's say groups or communities or just people even from different states that you're working with, be creative because again, you need to prove that you can adapt well, you can adjust well, and that you are going to be able to successfully navigate your new home.
Ricky, how about you? What are ways that you felt you had to apply flexibility and adaptability? I mean, you shared one example with the unexpected, incident, and the reconstruction of the site where
Oh
you were
yeah,
supposed to work. But
the fire.
anything else you can share with us where
Um,
flexibility and adaptability came into play?
yeah, I think one thing that's common in a lot of these type of federal government um applications, I mean, I think it's very similar to Peace Corps in some ways. Um, and also like the English teaching assistants um through the fellows program with the State Department. They always ask these kind of cultural adaptability kind of questions. And I think what they tend to look for is when you're in an unfamiliar situation, how do you adjust to it, right? They want to make sure that you can, like Haley was saying, can handle yourself appropriately in a place, but also deal with things like bills and getting a apartment and that sort of thing. Depending on the commission, you might have more or less help doing some of those kind of everyday life things, like getting an apartment. But but again, they want to see that cultural adaptability. So I would say focus on a situation in your life where you've had to adapt culturally. Maybe somebody would call it cultural shock. So I would say write about those kind of instances in your life. Um, that might help you show that you can live in a different place in a different country and be able to adapt without having too big of a hurdle.
Yeah. Okay, so we're receiving some questions in the Q&A. Let me go through that. So one question is in regards to my mentioning of the special characters in the application and not using diacritics. So that is correct. So because of the way that the application system works, if you use special characters or diacritics, it might not read properly on the reviewer end, and it might turn out as like a box or a question mark, and then the term you're using is, they don't know what you're trying to say. So just avoid all of that. Even though I understand it is not technically correct in the language you might be using, that is just how it works with the online application, and they understand that. That also being said, what we did not mention earlier, but I'll point out is no hard breaks when you're responding in the box. So you don't want to have paragraph breaks, just right. And you're like, wow, 6,000 characters in one huge paragraph. Well, okay, so the reason why you don't want to do that is because if you use a paragraph break, the way that it shows up on the reviewer side, it could get cut off after the paragraph break, and then half of what you wrote could be lost. So just write everything as one succinct paragraph. And again, reviewers completely understand that. Okay. Let's see. What recommendations do you have for pursuing a faculty/university affiliation for Open Study Research Awards?
I can talk briefly about
Yeah.
that too, because a lot of students I've talked with think that professors are too important, too like busy to answer emails. But the truth is, most of us, I mean, there's a few very famous professors, but most of us are always impressed that somebody actually read our work. So if you read an article by a professor from the country you want to go to and you think, wow, this person might be a really good mentor, like they seem to be doing exactly what I want to do, send them an email. Almost everywhere in the world, you can find professors' contact information on their university webpage. You can cold call email them and say, I read your article, blah, 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 and I'm really interested in doing this kind of work. I might be able to apply for a Fulbright. Would you be able to talk to me more about what you're doing? And I mean, you don't necessarily have to ask right out front, like, would you be my sponsor? But you can say, I'd like to learn more about it. And if there's possibilities for me to be doing this research as a Fulbrighter in your country at your university, even if they're not the right person, they probably know somebody in their university or in their country who is doing the work that would be appropriate for you. So don't be afraid to email professors. If one of your UH professors knows somebody in that country, that's an even better connection, because you can say, Dr. So-and-so is my advisor, or I've taken classes with this person. They recommended you as someone in this country that knows about what I'm doing.
Ricky, how did you find and secure your affiliate for your research proposal?
I emailed, like Betsy said. And then I actually met with her when I happened to be in Belgium, but you could also just do a Zoom meeting. But yeah, I met with my advisor, Mieke Vandenbroek. She was very lovely, very helpful, and wrote a invitation letter. When I was in country, she was also very helpful and there, but she wasn't. I think in the US we might be expected to invite if you have a scholar coming visiting you, you might be expected to invite them out to dinner, that kind of thing. It's not the same in Belgium. They're very helpful if you ask. If you don't ask, they assume you're doing okay. So that might be the case too. But yeah, I would say email's the best way, and try to schedule a talk meeting. It could be over Zoom or whatever, but yeah. It wasn't very hard. That part was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be, and is the reason I continued on with the application, because after you have that, then there's no reason not to at least put one in.
And I think I put this in the chat earlier, but it's really important because of the Fulbright deadline coming up so close to the beginning of our semester. It's really important to reach out to professors, especially in Europe, because they take their summer breaks really seriously. They turn their emails off. They do not answer messages usually for the entire months of July and August. And if you're wondering if you can get an affiliation letter before our September 7th deadline, write to them now because you want to get in before they start preparing for their summer breaks because they won't answer your emails in August.
Yes.
I'll just add to that. My recommendation to people who are proposing research awards is to have the letter of affiliation secured by the end of August. That's kind of like the last deadline to go by to get an affiliation. And depending on the country that you're going to propose for, I know that things are done differently, everywhere. One of the ways you might have to approach it is not stating it as a letter of affiliation, but saying a letter of support, because to some, letter of affiliation is a very formal thing that they won't provide until your grant has been secured. And that's not what you're asking for. You're really just asking for a letter that says, they've been communicating with you, they're interested in working with you, they fully support what you're proposing, they can be a valuable resource to you, they see value in the work that you're doing, this is how they're going to support you, all the connections that they're going to make for you, resources that will be provided, etc. So if anything, think of it more as a letter of support, even though it's technically termed letter of affiliation. Okay. Someone was asking about IRB. And so what I'll say about IRB for research proposals is that depending again on the country, they will dictate what IRB requirements you have to go through. So you may need the IRB approval from us at UH Manoa. You may need to have the IRB approval through your host institution abroad. So it varies by country, but depending on what you apply for as FPAs, Betsy and I would be working with you on that. Okay, someone's asking about dependent benefits, if they have to travel with you and or what qualifies as a dependent. So dependent awards are not available for every awarder country. You have to read the country profile. Two, they'll also specify, who they will include as dependents, whether that's children or a legally married spouse, or whatever, however else they want to define as dependent. And yes, your dependent must be with you during your entire grant period. They cannot come with you for a couple months and then go back home to the US. They have to, if you're there for 10 months, they're there with you for 10 months. So, okay, another question is, I'm currently pursuing a master's degree. Should I talk with my advisor to see if it's a good option for me to apply? Yes. Regardless of what degree level you're in, you should talk to determine if it is a good time to do it while you're still in your degree, if you should wait to graduate and pursue it after. We've seen it happen in different ways. In fact, we've even seen PhDs, as Betsy mentioned, because they did not have their PhD at time of application, they applied, but they used it as a postdoc opportunity. So that's something that, again, I would talk with you about because it might be a good fit to do and it might not be a good fit to do. And that's also something you should talk to your faculty advisor about as well. So, okay, I think that's it that we're seeing in the Q&A box. If there's anything else, please don't hesitate to ask questions. This is the time. You have not just two Fulbrighters, but you also have the two FBAs here. So
if you want to do a particular program, since the application is due at the very beginning of next school year, be thinking about courses you could take next year that would make you a stronger applicant, because you can mention plans for, I want to learn this language, or if you're applying for ETA, Second Language Studies has a lot of great classes that will help you become a better language teacher. So think about what you could do in the meantime. And even if you don't get the Fulbright, at least you'll have more language skills or more technical skills. Sorry, Haley, go ahead.
No worries. I was just thinking about something different as well, and something that is a small part of the application, but I found was really helpful was that language evaluation. I know it was mentioned earlier that even if it's optional, it's so important to show that you are willing to learn the language of wherever you're going, because Turkish, like for here, it is a less commonly taught language. Of course, at UH, unfortunately, there are no Turkish classes. There's not that many Turks that live in Hawaii. And so I had to get creative with my language evaluation, but it was optional for my program. But I really think it made a difference in showing that, I'm willing to come and to learn about these things. So even if you feel like it's a small part of the application, anything that says optional, if you can put in some effort there, some more effort, like it is a little more work up front, but it's so important because again, I think as I was saying earlier, like you really need to show like you are so passionate about this and that you care. So even if it's like those little steps like language evaluation, that's so important. I was able to talk about too, like I the whole summer before I went, I was doing Turkish tutoring online with a tutor that lived in Istanbul, and it was such a good experience. And looking back, I wish I would have gotten a tutor that was from the Black Sea region because their accent is a lot different. However, I think it's so that's where it's good to do some more research ahead of time as well, but show that you're willing to take those extra steps because again, they might feel small, but every part of the application is super important.
Yeah, and do read the specific country description because sometimes they do ask for specific things in your application essays. Like I remember Taiwan's ETA, one of the things they said was be specific about what region or what kind of location you want to be in. Do you want to be in a big city or a small town? Do you want to work with underprivileged students or minority populations? Those kind of things. And you want to make sure you're doing every single thing they ask for in the application, as well as the optional things. Another one is if you went to a community college, mention that in the place where it says, did you attend a community college? I've talked with people that think they should pretend like they didn't go to a community college. And then I look at their transcripts. I'm like, you started out at a community college. Mention that where it says, did you go to a community college? Because that is a factor they take into consideration because they want a wide range of people in the program.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier, and then we'll tie up by just kind of going around with all the panelists sharing last piece of advice is when you go through the campus review process, one of the things that Betsy and I are required to do as advisors is there's an evaluation form that we complete and submit that goes along with your application. Now it's it has nothing to do with the decision of what happens with your application. And it's called an evaluation form, but really the sole purpose of it is for us to try to add in any information that might not have been explained in your application. So for example, right, like Haley applied, to be an ETA in Turkey. So we don't have Turkish language classes here at UH Manoa, right? So I said that, right? So it's not, I wanted the reviewers to know Haley has to do this on her own. She has to use, these other means to learn the language, that she's at a, disadvantage in our institution by not being able to take formal classes. So she has to, be creative in how she's learning and gaining proficiency in that language, right? For those who are part of East West Center, there's so much that can be said about East West Center, but you have this really small space. So that's my opportunity to try to explain East West Center so that you don't have to spend, 1,000 characters of your allotted time, space in there explaining that. So that's really what that is. And I wanted to share that. So if we can just kind of go around, I'm going to start with Ricky. Ricky, is there one closing thought you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, just utilize the resources that you have because the fact that you're tied to the University of Hawaii gives you access to Kristen and Betsy and the university's writing resources. And I think that really does give you an advantage in the application if you can get those in to them earlier than later so that you have time to revise them. Yeah.
Haley?
Yeah, something that has been said throughout this webinar today is just start early because I honestly, thinking back on my experience, I was looking through the application materials today. You know, it took a lot of work, but I am so glad I gave myself that space to really think through, like, why am I doing this? What do I want to say that's going to make me a strong applicant? Because by the end of it, by, starting early, utilizing my resources, Kristen was honestly the most helpful person that I interacted with this whole process. She was so helpful. So please utilize the team here that we have. Because I've never felt more confident about an application I submitted by the time that, October 7th deadline came around. I felt so good about it, and I was like, I feel so good about this opportunity. And I was right, and now I'm here, and it's amazing. So start early and use these resources, and it's gonna be a lot of work, but it's gonna be so worth it. So start now.
Betsy?
This is something I say to a lot when I'm talking to students who aren't sure what country to go to. Use this as an opportunity to go somewhere unusual and interesting. Just because Japan and Korea are safe, you don't have to go to Japan and Korea. Think about one of the pictures in our slideshow is a UH grad who went to Tajikistan. There's all kinds of really interesting countries in the world, and Fulbright goes to a huge quantity of those places. This is your chance to have a supported opportunity to go to a new place and learn about a culture you may not have known about before. I mean, nothing against Japan and Korea. I love both places, but you can go there on your own. Tajikistan, you're unlikely to be going there for a vacation. So use Fulbright as a way to get to a new place and learn something new.
I'll just close with apply. There's no reason why not to apply. Go for it. This is an amazing opportunity. Haley and I were chatting before we started this webinar, and just the doors that it has opened for her and what I've seen for other Fulbrighters as well. It's just amazing. Sometimes it opens up pathways you weren't expecting that are really just formative in your life. So go for it and apply. And so if you are going to apply, just a reminder, if you're an undergraduate student or an undergrad alum, you'll be working with Betsy. If you're a current graduate student or soon to be graduate student alum, you'll be working with me. And so I'll put my email address in the chat box, Betsy, if you don't mind putting yours in as well. Great, there you go. You can take down our email addresses really quickly. I also shared the webinar eval if you wouldn't mind giving us feedback. We look forward to meeting with you, hearing about your interest in Fulbright and working with you on your applications. Thank you so much to Haley and Ricky for sharing about your Fulbright experiences. It's amazing to see and hear what you've been able to do. And thank you, Betsy, for joining us as well as we look forward to working with you. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.